Hey, and we're back. You're listening to Good Deeds Real Estate with a Mission. I'm Bill Weidecker from the Fine Homes Group at Keller Williams. And we've had a great conversation this morning talking about, primarily from a seller's perspective, we got a little bit of a real estate update in terms of mortgage rates and so forth. And I want to shift to the buying side because we've talked about sellers getting prepared. Diane, by the way, Diane Davidson, also from the Fine Homes Group at Keller Williams, my wife and my business partner. Yes. And we talked about sellers getting prepared for the market. So when they're ready, they're prepared. Does that exist on the buying side? If you're a buyer out there looking to buy your first house or you're looking to sell and buy, where do we go?
Absolutely. Absolutely exists. Of course they do. Elaborate, please. Okay, so generally speaking, there's money involved. Sellers prefer to have some money in exchange for their home. So the buyer's preparedness has to do with figuring out how they're going to pay and how much they would like to pay and how they will demonstrate that to a seller so a seller is comfortable signing an agreement on their home with a particular buyer.
I remember years ago, agent that I worked with, it's early 1980s when I started it in my early 20s.
Yes.
And I said to the agent, why are they selling the house? And he said, well, they no longer want the home and they'd rather have the cash. And that's true. Sellers are selling in exchange for the money that they're going to get for it to do other things.
Correct.
So from a buying perspective, if I'm the buyer and I raise my hand and say, okay, Fine Homes Group, tell me what to do.
Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about, certainly we're going to sit down and consult as we do.
Does this involve coffee again?
Well, except we usually provide the coffee.
I see.
Because it usually happens at our office.
Yes.
So,
okay.
So we're going to sit down and sort of go through the whole process step by step. And part of which is a needs analysis. So we understand what it is that, what and why they're thinking of buying and what it is they'd like to buy. But the important part of that is what they can, want to, should be spending. And so that's really the first best step before we sit down. And either somebody has assets sufficient enough to buy without a mortgage, or what is more common, somebody needs to have a mortgage.
Or wants one.
Sorry, yeah. Sure. So that first step for that buyer, that would be speaking to a lender. So we would certainly make a recommendation to a lender so that buyer, and they're not obligated to use the lender they first speak to, but it gives them an idea of what they should be looking for. And oftentimes a lender is willing to lend more money than someone might be comfortable paying for. They have other things they want to do, travel, whatever it is. And so they don't want the payments that the bank would allow them, that would be attached to the bank, the amount the bank would lend them. So sitting with a lender and understanding there are many different programs, as you covered last week. Everything doesn't have to be a 30-year fix, depending on what their plans are. They come up with probably the type of loan they're looking at and the price range that they're comfortable in. And at that point, provided the lender runs the credit report, then they usually walk away with, or shortly thereafter receive, a pre-qualification or pre-approval letter. And we can talk about a strategy that we like to employ with our buyers as far as getting them approved versus pre-qualified or pre-approved. But basically, once they understand what they can spend, then we sit, or want to spend, combination. Mm-hmm. That's when we sit down and talk about what's sort of driving the decision, what they'll be looking for, what they picture their life to be in their new home.
So let me interrupt.
Yes.
That sounds like the antithesis of what most buyers believe the process ought to be.
Yep. Let's go look at houses.
Well, yeah. Yep. Pick up the phone.
Yep.
I remember years ago an open house that we were doing, and you said to the people that walked in the door, how long have you been looking? And he said, we haven't been looking. We've been lurking, meaning they've been out there on the internet looking at houses. And most people start there.
Absolutely.
They're looking at what properties are on the market for, and then something appears and they go, oh my God, let's go. And it sort of feels like sequentially they're doing it the way they intuitively feel, but they're out of sequence, especially if they're not prepared properly. So you're saying, let's talk mortgages if you need one, or you want one, and then let's sit down and talk about what would you get if you could get whatever you wanted. That uncovers a lot for us.
Correct.
And it saves, in my opinion, because you always, the average buyer thinks, why are we going to spend all this time sitting down for hours? I want to go out and look at houses. And usually, what does a consultation with a realtor take?
Oh, half an hour, and then we usually have a little placeholder for our next appointment just before we start, before we put our foot over a threshold to do what we call a mock offer. To go through, remember we talked about in the last segment or one before, the purchase and sale agreement
Yes.
having over 100 blanks. So understanding what each blank is for and how to strategically put it together so that the offer is attractive to a seller and, frankly, in most cases, a win-win for the buyer. So there are terms that we put forth for in an offer on behalf of our buyers that strategically have helped our buyers win properties, win multiple bid situations over and over and over. We hear so many stories. It was their 20th offer, it was their 17th offer. Our buyers aren't going through that because they understand before they're in the sort of before there's an emotional investment, before they're in love with the house. When we do a mock offer, and we do it in the abstract, they don't have anything invested emotionally, so
There's
they
no
can
stress.
clearly. Pardon me.
There's no stress.
Exactly. So they can clearly understand the strategy we want to employ, ask questions. There's just no pressure, no stress. And so to answer your question, I remember what it was. The consultation itself is probably about a half an hour, and that mock offer process is about 15 minutes. And so we don't typically combine it in one session because it's a lot of information.
Sure.
So typically we just have a little placeholder to meet at a coffee shop or meet at the office and get in the same car afterwards, 15, 20 minutes to go through the mock offer.
So ultimately, this amount of time is not really, you're not taking the time as much as you're investing the time so that you are very well prepared in process. And then also, we are sharing the strategies that are going to put you in a favorable light. In a market like this, where in the previous two segments, we were talking about how little inventory there is out there. So how do you succeed in a market like this? You better have agents that know how to structure your offer to make you stand out from the crowd.
Exactly.
And rest assured, in a lot of cases out there in this marketplace, there is a crowd of offers. It's not like we have another offer. We have multiple offers, tens of offers, dozens of offers. And so you got to be you got to have some strategy rather than just let's just throw an offer together, because that's a huge waste of time.
Absolutely. And you know what? When you're spending time in one place, you can't spend it somewhere else. You're risking missing a perfect opportunity for something that really isn't an appropriate opportunity or occurrence. You
need good professional help in this market as a buyer.
Right. And so you're investing money, you're investing time. When you say, when you talk about investing, this is arguably the most important decision somebody makes in their life.
Yeah.
And for agents to not require basically a consultation with a buyer to prepare them is irresponsible.
Yeah, I had an old broker that when I first started in the business, he used to say it this way: you can't rush real estate. And for people that try to rush themselves into coming on the market as a seller too quickly, unprepared, buyers that rush themselves by trying to just skip all of the strategies and procedures end up being behind rather than further ahead.
And what about, I've bought before.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. 17 years ago.
Yeah, nothing's changed.
Same, nothing.
It's still
Nothing
a house.
Yep.
So this has been fascinating discussion today. I'm so glad you could be with us here at Real Estate with a Mission. We call it Good Deeds, and you're listening to Bill Weidecker and Diane Davidson from the Fine Homes Group at Keller Williams.
Thank you, Bill.
And
Justin.
We'll be back here next Saturday, so make sure you're here at 9 o'clock Saturday morning.
Sharp.